This is the Dzogchen Semde Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. It is Obi-Wan Kenobi early Wednesday morning. Come, let us meditate like a Jedi. After chanting the first quarter of the vast space of Vajrasattva, I recommend chanting this while performing diaphragmatic breathing. This is aided by us resting the tip of our left thumb upon our left ring finger and the tip of our right thumb upon our right ring finger. This vast space of Vajrasattva, the octopus, simply noticing and relaxing. The all-good expanse of the field of reality. Is an all-releasing and pure modality, uncreated, unceasing, and unthinking. Loving kindness is already complete, so compassion is not pursued. Supremely vast and deep, no quality exists to acclaim. Intentions unstirring from their own nature, so that requires some explanation. The more, and to explain that, I'm going to subject you to some visual aids. The more we over-focus and over-analyze, the more we overwork our medial and dorsolateral prefrontal cortices, the more we will trigger our amygdala, the seat of both anxiety and aggression, which is a bummer. However, when we cooperate with our sympathetic nervous system to notice during our inhalation, and when we cooperate with our parasympathetic nervous system to relax during our exhalation, the anxiety and aggression of our amygdala is calmed, and the empathy of our anterior cingulate gyrus is gently stimulated. Therefore, by simply playing with the mindfulness and meditation that comprise the 7th and 8th folds of the Buddha's Eightfold Path, it makes kindness of intention, kindness of communication, kindness of conduct, and kindness of commerce an inevitability. Let's go back to button 7. Intentions unstirring from their own nature, through non-action or released and activate release, unseeking self-sprung awareness, liberating reveals the modality of release. So self-sprung, we're going to call that spontaneous. It sounds less pubescent that way. Vajrasattva is the great elements Vajrasattva, like the great elements, intrinsically present in all beings. Even though false notions obsess us, release is spontaneous but only in him. So, one moment. Come on, coordination. Vajrasattva is an archetype of simply noticing and relaxing. So the release, our liberation from the tyranny of our own confusion is as spontaneous and effortless as our cooperation with our autonomic nervous system's tendencies to notice and relax. Exalted, pristine awareness so elusive can be accomplished through means and insight. Although these appear as supported extraneous fiction, real pleasure arises only spontaneously. Since the Neolithic Revolution and the rise of proto-capitalism, which has now come into full bloom as both fascism and jingoism, for approximately 13 millennia, we have been conditioned to be rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel. They told us that this is the key to peace and fulfillment, but it's not. It's the key to anxiety and aggression and profound dissatisfaction. Let's continue. I already told you half the thing, but before the Neolithic Revolution, for the better part of 300,000 years, our ancestors enjoyed a society that was pretty much proto-communistic, where the attributes of being flexible, loving, rational, laid back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, and kind not only ensured their survival for a huge ocean of time, but is so profound in their culture that it even shows up in the archaeological record. Therefore, the pleasure we desire is only found from the centered spontaneity, love's centered spontaneity, whose bedrock is cooperating with our autonomic nervous system in such a way that we notice and relax in harmony with our breathing. Together, the sublime magical illusion is easy to find through a subtle understanding of actuality, of all potential and potency. It instantly emerges by itself. No, we do not have to force noticing and relaxing. Like a program on our smartphone running in the background, our autonomic nervous system automatically notices and relaxes. However, our programming, our 13 millennia old programming as a species, causes us to actively compete against our own autonomic nervous system. All sitting in meditation is us setting aside a few minutes every 12 hours or so to say, I'm going to spend some time passively cooperating with my autonomic nervous system. Like blowing our nose or washing our face, this is a form of hygiene, but hygiene for our central nervous system. Let's continue. The invisible nature of reality fills the mind with when searching stops. This does not mean we are told to be stupid. The key is, how do we use all the organelles of our central nervous system in the most sustainable way? If we use the organelles in a distinctly unbalanced way, it's going to feed our neurotic anxiety and aggression. So the more we cooperate with our autonomic nervous system, the more we practice mindfulness and meditation, the more our choices and our utterances and our deeds will flow not from contrived calculations, nor from wild scatteredness, but instead from love's deeply centered spontaneity. This is the difference between a mere lab technician and a Nobel laureate. Let's continue. Start from the top of the page. The invisible nature of reality fills our mind when active searching stops. Stressing about the what and the wherefore inhibits its spontaneous arising. This hermetically sealed reality cannot be transmitted from mouth to ear. And neither has the tongue the power to express a bit of it. The suffering of beings is bodhicitta, and fully awakened it is song and dance. Okay, so citta means mind, bodhi means enlightenment. So we're not saying, hey, suffering's cool, man, turn on the disposal and feed it your arm. Hell no. What we're saying is that as we relax into our exhalation, whatever pleasure or pain we noticed during our previous inhalation feels as if it was melting into the simplicity of just sensation. Whatever we experience, be it external or internal, physical or mental, pleasurable or painful, interesting or boring, glorious or grotesque, when fed through the sieve of mindfulness and meditation, makes our life into the opening act, the opening number of a Broadway musical. Broadway musicals are such a drag. They start on an upbeat and they end on a downbeat. What a drag. At least 9 times out of 10. But the opening number is always just, woo! It's like espresso for the ears, isn't it? So our life is as wondrous as the opening act as the opening number of a Broadway musical when it is defined by our passive cooperation with our autonomic nervous system. From the top of the page, the suffering of beings is bodhicitta, and fully awakened it is a song and dance. Unstirring, unmovable, like infinite space, suffering is sameness. We tend to interpret. So this is not something to believe. This is not something to reason. This is something to viscerally experience simply by passively cooperating with our own autonomic nervous system. This is not a rarefied experience only for the special people who have gone through austerities. Every living, complex entity is capable of experiencing this. Together, we tend to interpret congruous distinctions as karmic relationship. Inasmuch as karma holds sway, self-sprung awareness is lacking. So there is material causality and superstitious causality. If you drop a cinder block 2 meters upon your foot, and you're probably going to wind up with a contusion, if not a fracture, probably a hematoma. In other words, you'll probably get cut and bruised and perhaps break something. That is not spooky. That is just the laws of physics playing out. However, saying that because you looked cross-eyed at some fellow in robes, your penis is going to fall off, or you're going to take rebirth in hell, that's superstition. Allowing the fear of misfortune and the desire for good fortune to be our North Star is duality. The more we practice mindfulness, let me jump back for a second. The highest love is the spontaneous and uncontrived byproduct of simply noticing and relaxing in harmony with our breathing. When this love guides our 4 bases of mindfulness, our experience of the mental, the interpersonal, the physical, and the circumstantial, when it drives us to practice loving kindness that is intentional and interpersonal and that pertains to our conduct and our commerce, then love is our North Star. Better to take love as our North Star than our efforts to game the system. Let's continue. The so-called only condition is immutable and never originating. It can never be destroyed. This timeless primordial pure essence of mind. Speculative thought forms cannot affect basic spaciousness. We cannot conceptualize the taste of a strawberry. Faith will not give us the taste of a strawberry. You have to reach for a strawberry, pop it in your mouth, and chew. It's ironic that people talk about intellectualism and superstitions as shortcuts to enlightenment, but they talk about enlightenment in terms of lifetimes of an individual, or the lifetime of a universe, or the lifetimes of a galaxy. However, in his discourse on the 4 bases of mindfulness, in the second to the final passage, the Buddha explained there is a way to practice wherein we master his path, his eightfold path of enlightenment, in as little as 7 days. This easy experiential path of practice is the most efficient. Let's continue. Concentration in its finest form. Is non-reflective in its very nature. As unreflected, unaltered experience, pristine awareness arises in thought itself. The best concentration is not concentration, it's mindfulness. Concentration that overworks our medial prefrontal cortex right behind our forehead is going to trigger our amygdala, make us cranky little bastards. By relying upon the sympathetic nervous system in the middle part of our spinal cord to notice vulnerably, passively, viscerally, randomly, and fleetingly whatever perceptions, emotions, intentions, thoughts, memories, or imaginings cartwheel across the stage of our mind. That is the key. Some identify luminism as a subtle door, seeking a way to isolate it. They focus on the voidness of the mind stream. If it is contrived, it is conceptual meditation. One of the problems of lazy teachers or literalist teachers is that sometimes their students get lost in nihilism, forgetting that emptiness itself is empty, or that voidness itself is void. So let's think of it this way. What if selflessness or emptiness were just metaphors that could best be described by reverse engineering them into similes? We'll start with selflessness. As we relax into our exhalation, whatever we noticed during our previous inhalation could fleetingly feel a trifle less stressful, a little bit less permanent, a little bit less defining. There you have it. That's all selflessness means. At least for a moment, until our next inhalation, when the cycle begins afresh. But what about emptiness? Simple. As we relax into our exhalation, whatever we noticed during our previous inhalation could fleetingly feel as non-graspable as a vast empty void. What is a real-world example of a non-graspable vast empty void? How about the illusion of the infinite azure sky on a bright and beautiful cloudless morn, which although could look tantalizing to the eye, could feel not graspable to the hand. So we see that emptiness is just a metaphor to explain a fleeting experience latent within every exhalation. How long does it last? For as long as your exhalation, then you breathe in, and the whole Megillah begins again. Let's continue. Some believe that by designating cause and effect, both virtue and vice are clearly defined, and the mundane world is transcended. However, so-called moral discrimination is duality's supreme presumption. There was a time before institutional Buddhism when people practiced proto-Buddhism, guided simply by the Buddha's eightfold path of enlightenment, 50% of which is comprised of loving kindness of intention, loving kindness. Let's go over here. Quick look at Bunny. I'm going to tap button 9. So 50% of the Buddha's eightfold path is comprised of loving kindness of intention, loving kindness of communication, loving kindness of conduct, being non-violent and all that kind of good stuff, and loving kindness of commerce. Moving from the competitive paradigm to the cooperative paradigm, viewing every sentient entity as our comrade, as our sibling. We're all in this ride together. We're all riding the conveyor belt from birth to death. The greatest fulfillment we can experience, ask any neuroscientist, they'll tell you, a fulfilling life is one in which we have engaged our oxytocin circuit through kindness and cooperation. When we are slaves to our dopamine cycle, it might help us to survive, but it will not help us thrive. Forgive the rhyme. All right, Cowabunga, we have completed this morning's recitation. Let us now turn our attention to meditation. Let us sit as comfortably and sustainably as we can. Let me check the time. It's 25 minutes after the hour. So let's meditate for the next 30 minutes or so. Hey, Deb, you are utterly, utterly welcome. By the way, the moment you have a specific question about Buddhist philosophy or meditation, or you wish to share a greeting, let's type it in great detail in the chat window, for I tend to check, from this point forward, I will tend to check for questions about every 6 minutes or so. So we're going to begin. For the first half of our silent meditation, let's gently invite our subtle energies to coalesce at the crown of our head. To do this, we're going to make some subtle distinctions with our fingers and our breathing. We'll start with our fingers. Let us use the tip of our left index finger to support the large knuckle at the lower knuckle of our right index finger, palms up in our lap. As we feel air enter our nostrils, let us silently and mentally recite the verb noticing. As we feel air exit our nostrils, let's silently and mentally recite the verb relaxing. Playing with these verbs does not make our autonomic nervous system notice and relax. It's going to do that anyway. Then why? Why do we play with these two verbs? Because it tells our will, our volition, that listen, we're taking a break from our controlling tendencies to actively compete against our autonomic nervous system. And instead, we're going to passively cooperate with these natural healing processes. In addition to using the tip of our left index finger to support the lower knuckle of our right index finger, we can use the thumb of our left hand. We can touch the thumb of our left hand to the lower set of creases on its little finger. Doing so helps us to keep track of our first set of 12 inhalations. Where do we actually enumerate those 12 inhalations? On our right hand. Every time we silently and mentally recite the verb noticing as we inhale, we can advance our right thumb across the sets of creases found on the underside of its 4 fingers. Together, let us practice right now. This will take about a little bit more than a minute. Look, my right thumb has run out of sets of creases upon which to rest. Therefore, I return my attention to my left thumb and advance it to the next set of creases. And now you get the basic idea of how we can count 12 sets or 12 inhalations each. Now, holding my hands up in front of the camera is great for demonstration, but it's uncomfortable as hell. So I implore you to practice this palms with your hands palms up, resting in your lap. And please inform your perfectionistic tendencies that it's perfectly okay to give ourselves permission to have a learning curve. Let's shift gears and gently invite our real or imagined subtle energies to coalesce in our chest. We'll do that by making a subtle distinction with our with our knuckles and with our breathing. Let us lift I'm going to lift my hands from my lap just for the sake of illustration. And instead of using my left index finger to support the lower knuckle of my right index finger, I'm going to use the tip of my left middle finger to support the lower knuckle of my right index finger. And now I'm going to begin a second collection of 12 sets of 12 inhalations each. There is nothing magical about sitting per se. We can meditate sitting, standing, lying down, walking. We can even meditate while making love. For someone who does physical labor all day long, sitting in meditation could be refreshing. For someone who does clerical work all day long, brisk meditation could be refreshing. Let's not take a superstitious point of view when approaching mindfulness and meditation. You have taken your first step into a much larger world. If you feel that I have earned it, you could give this live stream a thumbs up. You could even help support this channel. For Meditate Like a Jedi is made possible thanks to the generosity of viewers just like you. But remember, these donations are optional. And whether you donate or not, you're welcome to attend, to download, to ask questions, the whole schmear. In approximately 10 hours, I would very much like to return to lead today's dusk recitation, explanation, and practice of meditating like a Jedi. And if you are as geeky as me, may the Force be with you always.